Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night at the local time. First we're going to start with Zherebyanki. This is the western flank of Bradley Square or Orekhov bridgehead, the Battle of Orekhov. And today, as we discussed during the previous days, after the Ukrainians' 128th Mountain Assault Brigade was defeated on this bridgehead, they made a lot of attempts trying to capture Zherebyanki. Basically, this brigade managed to establish control first over the settlement Lapkove. After that, they made a lot of attempts to attack and to capture Petykhatki, and probably they managed to do this. The Russians were forced to step back from Petykhatki in direction of Zherebyanki, and after that, this brigade got the final order to establish control over Zherebyanki, and as I understand, after that, they were promised to be replaced by other forces. And the Ukrainians, during the previous days, made a lot of attempts to attack Zherebyanki. The Ukrainians were trying to attack, let's say, from the Petykhatki itself in direction of Zherebyanki. The Ukrainians were trying to attack the Russian positions from the north. All those attacks were repelled. We remember the video when the Ukrainian soldiers entered the fortifications, and after that the Russians took a decision to blow the fortifications up, and after all those attempts, the Ukrainians were forced to step back towards like Lapkova, and furthermore there was a day that the Ukrainians took a decision to completely move the entire every single soldier from Petykhatki as well. And basically after that, the 128th Mounted Assault Brigade was moved to the mainland. Currently the destination position of these forces is unknown, but starting yesterday, the Russian sources started reporting that the Ukrainians have already redeployed in this direction the forces of 117th Mechanized Brigade and of 116th Mechanized Brigade. So the 128th was replaced by the forces of these two brigades, and currently they continue their offensive operation. And starting today, the Ukrainians launched massive waves of attacks, probably using the new forces, and they continue bombing. During these small operational pauses of regrouping, the Ukrainians continue bombing and shelling the settlement of Zherebyanki using artillery strikes, using the drones, using all types of weapons they have, just to pin down the Russians and allow the Ukrainians to complete the regrouping process of their forces. And after they move their main armies of 117th and 16th Brigades, they relaunched their attack in direction of Zherebyanki. And for example, today the Russians have already published the video, the results of another wave of Ukrainian attack during the day, during the 9th of July. And as you can see on this video, the Ukrainians lost at least one tank and at least two tanks even, and one or two armored vehicles or personal armored carriers. For now, the Russians still controls and holds Zherebyanki, and without even a single chance to Ukrainians to capture the settlement. Now we're going to the Bradley Square. The Ukrainians during the previous 12 hours made another attempt to attack the Russian positions in Rabotina, and currently they were attacking the settlement on the eastern flank of that area, and they were moving along the fields, along the forest lines to the south. And the Russian sources are saying that as a result of those attacks during the first wave of that attack, the Ukrainians managed to achieve some success. They managed to penetrate the Russians' defense belt and even to capture the, let's say, the last defense positions in front of this small settlement Rabotina. But after that, after the Ukrainians managed to get so close to the Russian positions, they of course they requested some support from armored vehicles, and the Ukrainians' armored vehicles that were located in the back started moving to the south, trying to support and trying to help the Ukrainians, the infantry on the edge, to dig deeper in. And there was a very interesting case. The rain started. There was a very heavy rain, and the Russian sources published the results of that rain, the rain itself, and basically the Ukrainians' armored vehicles stuck on the north and couldn't proceed and couldn't move further because of poor quality of the ground. And basically the Ukrainian soldiers who managed to capture the edge Russian positions in this area were blocked, were cut off from the mainland, from the main forces, with very dirty ground, with a very poor quality of the ground, and they was in that position for a very long time. The Russians took that situation in their favor, and they bombed and shelled the Ukrainians using all types of weapons they have, and basically They completely destroyed the forces that managed to get, let's say, the northern positions of Robotyne. Now we're moving further. There were no updates from the Vremivka tactical bridgehead. The Russians continue publishing the videos of helicopters attacks. I believe that everybody tired to count the losses of the Ukrainians during the results of Ka-52 attacks and so on. But as I understand, these losses of armored vehicles is coming to 100 pieces just from the helicopters. Very interesting updates are coming from Novomikhailovka, and the most interesting part of these updates is that we don't see any active actions from the Ukrainian side. The Russians during the previous 2 weeks, probably at least that was like geolocated, and we got video confirmation, they used at least 3 times the kamikaze machines to penetrate Ukraine's defense belt, and that tactic was very successful. And currently the Ukrainians have redeployed some drone squad to this area, and today the Ukrainians, at least starting from today, the Ukrainians start publishing the videos how they try to pin down and to attack the Russian positions in the vicinity of Novomikhailovka using drones, using artillery. They try to correct and navigate the artillery systems with drones. So anyway, we see some kind of intensifying of actions, and as we understand, this is a very important bridgehead for the Russians. This is primary target for the Russians during this counter-offensive operation, and we understand that the Russians will continue intensifying their actions in this area with one purpose: to get as close as possible to the Ukrainian positions in Novomikhailovka, and of course basically to capture the settlement. So anyway, I believe that maybe even this summer we are going to see the fall of Novomikhailovka. When talking about Donetsk front line, the Ukrainians also took a small operational pause, either as the Russians, after the clashes in this bridgehead. The Ukrainians tried to maintain their bridgehead and to get as close as possible to the Russian position, just to prepare themselves before another wave of attack. For example, in this video we see how the Ukrainians were trying to maintain the gray zone to get as close as possible to the Russians before the next attack. They were trying to capture the checkpoint and the trenches on stronghold that wasn't occupied by anybody. The Russians discovered the Ukrainian movements and they started bombing and shelling them. After that, the Ukrainians took a decision to retreat because they were discovered, and not everything was very successful for the Ukrainians during the retreating process to the north of Vodyano-Opytne line. Now we're moving to the Artyomovsk after the Ukrainians were completely defeated during their attack in direction of Mayorsk in this area. And we remember we saw the videos of waves of attacks of 28th and 24th Mechanized Brigade in that direction. The Ukrainians also took a decision to make a small operational pause in this area, trying to regroup, maybe trying to develop the territory that they did manage to establish control, because they were defeated. Maybe they haven't reached the settlements like Bakhmutka, Bandarovka and so on, but anyway they managed to capture some forest lines, and probably now they're trying to dig in. There were also no updates from Klishchevka, and the only area we had some updates and we had some intensifying or something like this is the area that located on the, let's say, the left and the north and top side of this yellow line. The Ukrainians were trying to accumulate as much as possible forces in this area, and basically after a few attempts to attack Klishchevka from the north, after the failed attempts, the Ukrainians took a decision to change their tactic, and first of all they took a decision to cut the Russian supply roads that goes inside of Klishchev or from Bakhmut itself. So basically the Russians have this road to use, like, to supply the forces and so on, and basically the Ukrainians currently try and they continue on trying to accumulate their forces on the, let's say, left side of this yellow line with one purpose: to start another attack and to cut physically the road that goes to the Klishchevka itself. The Russians, of course, it's not a very big square, it's a very small battlefield, so the Russians do have possibility to control every single square meter. So they saw everything, they see everything, and they will see everything in the future. The Russians almost every single hour, every single minute try to bomb and shell possible Ukrainian positions. Let's say in this video we see this video is geolocated, how the Ukrainians were trying to establish control or to dig deeper inside of the forest line that located in front of that supply road that we discussed. The Russians discovered the Ukrainian positions and continue bombing and shelling, and the same situation took place on the northern part of this area. This is the like residential area. We see how the Russians are bombing this territory. Of course, the Russians also understand that this is the perfect bridgehead. This is the perfect area for the Ukrainians to continue developing their offensive operation even inside of Bakhmut. For now, they can't do this because for these purposes they need to secure Klishchiivka and they need to capture Klishchiivka that's located on the hill. And as soon as they are able to do this, they will be able to see everything on the southern flank of Artyomovsk as in their own hands. And of course, then the Ukrainians will start these exactly two operations. So everything is complicated, but for now, the Ukrainians try to develop, and the Russians, for now, are able to hold and were able to defeat every single Ukrainian attempt to attack. Also, the Russians published another video of clashes in Berkhovka and this settlement. As you know, the Ukrainians tried to attack not just on the southern flank, they made a lot of attempts to attack in the northern. They were trying to attack Berkhovka, and as we discussed, the main purpose of that attack is not just to to cut the northern flank or something like this. The most important attempt and the most important goals of this operation is to secure the flanks, and after that the Ukrainians are planning to enter from Khromovo to enter the western part of Artyomovsk. And this video shows how the Ukrainians managed to get inside of this settlement. They captured almost like a half of this settlement, but later as a result of those clashes, we understand that that was some kind of trap from the Russian side. They allowed the Ukrainians to enter, to move a very powerful, very big number of forces inside of this settlement. Later, those forces were cut off by the Russian artillery systems between Berkhovka water reservoir and the railroad ways. And after that, the Russians started clearing operation, and lots of Ukrainians were captured on this bridgehead. Very interesting video we start receiving, very interesting series of videos we start receiving from the bridgehead, from the Ukrainian front line, from Razdolovka to Veselaya to Berestova Belogorovka. Currently I'm talking about this area, this line. The Ukrainians are trying to attack, of course, the most important, let's say, tasty piece of cake for the Ukrainians is to establish control over Yakovlevka. And one more time to repeat the Russian steps before capturing Solidar. Without Yakovlevka, hardly unlikely the Ukrainians are able to take Solidar, and for these purposes the Ukrainians have already launched at least 2 attacks. The first one, the Ukrainians are trying to attack and to force the Russians to step back from the railroad ways. During the previous days, at least during the previous week, we got at least around dozens of video from these railroad ways showing how the Ukrainians using the drones were trying to bomb and shell the Russian positions, trying to force the Russians to step back in direction of Belogorovka. And there were a lot of attempts from the Ukrainian side to attack from Razdolovka in direction of Nikolaevka, in direction of Krasnopopovka. Those attacks were repelled, and today, this night, the Ukrainians made another attempt to attack the Russians from Razdolovka, between Razdolovka and Veselaya in direction of Yakovlevka. In this video, the Ukrainians have accumulated a very powerful attack fist in Razdolovka. This is Razdolovka, by the way, on the video. That was the force of 54th Mechanized Brigade. They have accumulated significant fist, and they have, as you can see, bypassed the entire settlement. Then they entered the field and start movements from the north of Razdolovka in direction of Yakovlevka among the fields. Of course, those fields weren't mined, but the most important part of this video is that currently the state of the map is not correct, because as we can see, there are 2 states: either the Ukrainians controls the fields, or these fields is in the gray zone and nobody controls them. Anyway, the Ukrainians launched their attack. The Russians managed to discover, to spot the Ukrainian movements, and they started bombing and shelling the Ukrainians' armored vehicles during that attack. Basically, as a result of that attack, the Ukrainians were defeated. Probably they managed to get some infantry, some forces to the forest line, and to maintain the forest line, and to maintain the gray zone, and to get as close as possible to the Russian positions. So we are talking about these 2 forest lines that goes from this is the lake, small lake from Razdolovka to the south, And as I understand, as a result of that video, the Ukrainians managed to get here, and currently they're trying to get them to dig in deeper, and they're trying to maintain this area. And after that, basically the Ukrainians have already prepared, let's say, some bridgehead to continue offensive operation to the south in direction of Solidar and to the east in direction of Yakovlevka. So this is the video of those clashes of bombings and artilleries. Most of the armored vehicles and light vehicles the Ukrainians managed to evacuate, and just the infantry were left in this area. So one more time, as I understand, as a result of that attempt, the Ukrainians managed to maintain the gray zone, and currently they control something like this, at least on this part of the area. So this is their under their control area, and we need to expect more attempts from the Ukrainian side to attack in direction of Solidar and Yakovlevka. The very interesting video we got from Tarskoye, and I have added this video to this map, and I would like to discuss with you because you know that one of the most powerful, one of the most dangerous weapon that the Russians use in the special military operation is, of course, TOS flamethrower systems. And this is not like the Russian weapon. This weapon was made during the Soviet times, but since the beginning of the special military operation, we haven't seen even a single usage of this type of weapon by the Ukrainians, no matter that this weapon was created in the Soviet times. And today, or at least these days, the Ukrainians, as a result of fierce fightings in Tarskoye area, according to this author of this video, managed to capture the Russians' flamethrower systems, and they started using them against the Russian positions. Anyway, this video shows at least two situations. The first one is that this video showed the geolocation of the Russian forces that were bombed by the Ukrainian TOS flamethrower systems. As you know, the distance of these systems are not so big, so anyway, the Ukrainians probably were attacking the Russians somewhere from this area or something like this. So something from somewhere from this, like 1 kilometer, a little bit, maybe more. Maybe they were attacking the Russians somewhere from this area, but not so far from the combat line. This is just the interesting part of that video. And that's it for this short update. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.